Mutations. Some of you guys have maybe heard of what a mutation is, but you don't necessarily know what they truly are. So we're going to talk a little bit today about what mutations are, what some examples are, and how they happen in the body. So the definition for a mutation is really just a change in the genetic material, which, remember, your genetic material is your DNA. Many mutations are what we call neutral. If you're neutral, you really don't hold a stance on something or have a decision. Same thing in the body. There's really no effect on the protein that gets made by that particular section of DNA or gene. Some mutations can be beneficial. Beneficial means good. So in this case, maybe they might increase genetic variety. It may give you a new trait. It might give you a special color fur that helps you to possibly blend in with the environment a little bit better. It may help you survive better as a species when you have a changing environment. Other mutations can be what we call deleterious or harmful. Definitely not a good thing. Maybe it could be something that codes for some sort of genetic disorder that doesn't allow you to survive or thrive well in your environment, or it maybe even could cause cancer. The idea is that the causes of mutations are random. We have no idea when they're going to happen. We can't even predict when they're going to happen. What happens is there could be an error during DNA replication. When DNA is making a copy of itself, it may accidentally put in the wrong letter, kind of like when you accidentally make a spelling error when you're writing down a word. During cell division, this could happen during mitosis or meiosis, or even just when DNA is making a copy of itself to repair a cell for mitosis. It could be caused by something called a mutagenic agent, or sometimes we call that a mutagen. A mutagenic agent is something that causes a mutation. Some examples of mutagenic agents could be something like ultraviolet light from the sun. We know that skin cancer can be caused by sunlight. Sunlight is a type of radiation, and it is considered to be a mutagen. We know that it can cause changes in DNA, especially in certain organisms and even in bacteria. We also have mutagenic agents that we know of that are different chemicals, things that are found in the environment, or something that's man-made. A mutation in a somatic cell, which is a body cell, a non-sex cell, really affects the individual only. It doesn't affect necessarily their offspring. So this is a non-inherited type of cancer or disease, and usually this is often considered to be something that happened from the environment. It was an environmental effect that happened during life. These, remember, you do not pass on to your offspring. So let's say if I had skin cancer as a result of going out and tanning too often, it's something that isn't necessarily inherited all of the time, certain types of skin cancer. And because it happened in my skin and not in my sex cells, I don't pass that on to my offspring. Remember, we only pass on our DNA to our offspring that's in the gametes. So a mutation in a gamete or a sex cell, remember the sperm or egg, we call this a germline mutation, for those of you interested in the specific name. This is something that would affect our offspring. It's present in every cell of the offspring due to mitosis of those original cells dividing. So some examples would be different types of inherited forms of cancer or diseases, and typically we talk about these things that run in a family. So this is just a diagram. You might want to pause and try to be able to write out the two different types of diagrams. This is a way that we can show how a somatic cell would be affected. So we might have an error in the skin due to UV light, like I discussed before, causing skin cancer. And in this case, it would go into each of the cells that cell divides into. All of the other body cells would not have the error, like our gametes. If this is a germline mutation, so it's happening in the sperm or egg, when those sperm and egg join and then eventually create the other cells, we would have cells that have the errors in them. There are several different types of mutations that can happen. Sometimes we can talk about gene mutations. So we would actually have a mutation in a specific gene, and this would produce a change in a single gene. Sometimes we can call point mutations changes in one or a few nucleotides, a specific point on a gene. So there are a couple of different types of point mutations. We could have a substitution, and a substitution is exactly what it sounds like. We've substituted one nucleotide for another. or one letter for another, so we've swapped them. So in this case, you can see I would normally have a T, A, C, G, C, A, and so on. And accidentally, my body put in a T instead of the C. I made a spelling error. I substituted one letter for another. That's a substitution. You could also have a deletion or an insertion, and those are also exactly what they sound. You've either removed or added one nucleotide. So instead of my original segment, TAC, GCA, and so on, I accidentally, in this case, added one in. So I've had an insertion, and it's TATCGC, and you can see the rest of it repeats as it should. But if you notice, with an insertion, I now have shifted the entire section of DNA. So when you look at these codons, it has changed the entire codon by adding in that one extra letter. When you look back at the substitution, when I substitute that one letter in, the other codons still remain the same. So usually those don't have as much of an effect on that particular gene or protein as much as the deletion or the insertion does. So when we have this deletion or insertion, we call this a frame shift mutation, and basically it just means we've shifted everything over one to account for that additional. So all of the amino acids after the change may be impacted. It doesn't mean they're going to be every time, but they can be. There are also chromosome mutations. So instead of at the individual gene level, we can also have a mutation on an entire chromosome. So it's a change in the number or structure of chromosomes. So if we have our original chromosome that looks like this, we have genes A, B, C, and D, E, F on either end of the chromosome with the centromere here. We could delete an entire section of the chromosome, and we might be missing gene B here. We could have a duplication. We have an extra gene B there. We could have an inversion, where you can see my letters are kind of jumbled up. And we could also have a translocation, which essentially means that we have changed the location of where some of the genes are. So they've swapped on a different piece of a chromosome. Oftentimes, many genes can be involved in these types of mutations when we have chromosome mutations. Now remember, we can also have an entire change in the chromosome number. So you can inherit an entire extra chromosome or have a chromosome missing. And those are considered to be our chromosome mutations. We'll talk a little bit more about mutations in class and talk about how they can affect an individual and also how they can affect your offspring.